Been hunting for a pre-built gaming PC that actually lives up to the hype and doesn't require you to become a tech wizard to get it running? Maybe you've scrolled through endless specs and wonder if any of them truly deliver the smooth experience you're after. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been spending the last couple of weeks testing the BEASTCOM Q5 Pro, the one that comes with an AMD Ryzen 9 5900X and an RTX 5060. First off, the moment I opened the box, the plug-in. Power on. Go Beast tagline felt less like marketing fluff and more like a promise. The system powers up with a single button press, the fans spin up quietly, and within seconds you're on the desktop, Windows already loaded. No fiddling with BIOS settings or worrying about driver updates, the whole thing is practically ready out of the gate. For anyone who plays modern titles like Cyberpunk 2077 or Elden Ring, the Ryzen 9 5900X is a real workhorse. It gives you 12 cores and 24 threads, which translates to buttery smooth performance when you're running a game while streaming, having a voice chat, or even keeping a couple of background apps open. I tested a typical streaming setup while playing at 144 Hz on a 1440p monitor, and the frame rate stayed solid, never dipping under 60 frames per second. That kind of headroom is exactly what you need when you want to stay competitive without sacrificing visual quality. The RTX 5060, while not a top-tier GPU, hits a sweet spot for most gamers today. It handles ray tracing at 1080p with decent frame rates, and if you dial down to a more modest setting, you can push well into the 144 Hz zone on a 1440p screen. In my everyday use, I was able to run Fortnite at ultra settings with 140 frames per second, and Valorant barely broke a sweat at max resolution. For budget-conscious players who still want that modern look, it offers a respectable trade-off between price and performance. Storage is another area where the Q5 Pro shines. The 1TB NVMe SSD loads Starfield in under a minute, and you'll notice the difference immediately when you swap between games or launch large titles. No more waiting on those old mechanical drives that spin for ages before you get to the main menu. The SSD also adds a nice boost to general Windows tasks. Opening large Photoshop files or running multiple virtual machines feels snappy. One of the practical things I appreciated was the built-in Wi-Fi 5. While Wi-Fi 6 is becoming the norm, the 5 GHz band on a decent router still delivers stable, low-latency connections for online gaming. I played a few matches on a server 200 kilometers away, and the ping stayed in the low 40s, which is more than sufficient for competitive play. The antenna placement on the back panel is unobtrusive, and the wired Ethernet port is ready if you prefer a hardwired link for the ultimate stability. Design-wise, the BEASTCOM chassis is compact but still manages decent airflow. The front-row presence they talk about isn't just about looks. The intake vents line up with the case fans, pulling cool air over the CPU and GPU. Even after a couple of hour-long gaming sessions, the heat stayed manageable, and the fans never ramped up to a noisy level. If you're setting up a small gaming corner or a shared living space, the low acoustic profile is a real plus. Ease of use is something that often gets overlooked with pre-built PCs, but the Q5 Pro makes it simple. The power button is forward-facing, the cable management inside the case is tidy, and the included toolkit lets you swap out a RAM stick or add another SSD without much hassle. For people who want a plug-and-play experience but still keep the door open for future upgrades, that kind of flexibility is valuable. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons as I see them after a few weeks of daily use. On the plus side, the CPU performance is excellent for both gaming and productivity. The graphics card gives a solid visual experience without breaking the bank, and the fast SSD cuts loading times dramatically. On the downside, the 16 GB. For most buyers, the real question is not whether BEASTCOM Q5 Pro Gaming PC, AMD Ryzen 9 5900X 12X 4, 80 GHz 24 threads, RTX 5060 8 GB, 16 GB RAM, 1 TB NVMe SSD, Wi-Fi 5 sounds impressive on paper, but whether strengths like Ryzen power, BEASTCOM flow and first to fire. First to win actually make daily use feel easier, more dependable, and more worthwhile after the first few days of excitement were off.